cybersecurity is a winner. Foreign aid, neutral.
I didn't go that deep into the budget paper. You've obviously read the whole thing, Ben.
No, I just read that if it's green, they're winner. Red, loser. Renewables, loser. Backer won't be happy.
We've got some fresh new young talent doing some things that I know you haven't heard before.
1, 2, 3, listen.
Welcome to Finances, your home for all things financial, investment, money and lifestyle. Hosted and curated by the very talented team of certified financial planners, Burke Financial Partners.
This is episode 5 of the Finances podcast. Joined today by Ben Kemp again. Seems like you're the only guest we have, Ben.
I must be the only one with not much to do.
Well, the only one with not much to do post a federal budget. Is this the most exciting podcast you've ever done?
The word budget gets you excited, doesn't it?
It does, and I'm sure that the views and the listens on this conversation will go up. To be honest, this is something we said just before offline that historically when the budget comes out, as financial planners, we kind of look at it as like selfishly, what can we do with our clients with what changes are proposed? As I've got older, and I'm sort of stretching into deep into my 40s now, the lens has kind of changed a little bit. You look at it from an economic point of view and what sort of impact it's going to have on the decisions that the government's making about economics, and then you look at it from a political point of view, which I've been sort of relatively politically apathetic, haven't really taken much interest at all in politics, but I've certainly had more interest of recent time. But for today's conversation, we're kind of going to stick to how this impacts our clients and potential clients from a planning point of view. So let's jump in, mate. What are probably the key takeaways from a financial planning and individual perspective?
There's obviously a long list of things that have been raised in the budget, but we thought, again, I'd probably narrow it down to 4, and we'll probably talk around those a little bit as well. But the number one, which impacts a lot of our current clients, is the pension reduction extension. So when we say pension, we're talking about super pension, what you need to draw down. So as you get older and you're of age of being able to access your super, there's a mandated minimum that you have to draw down, and through this will be now the third financial year in a row that they've had this provision in place, is that they've just reduced it by 50%. So instead of needing to draw 4%, 2%, you only have to draw. And realistically, all they're trying to do is protect people's balances that might be still recovering from market downturn during the outbreak of COVID and the market impact that followed that. So again, we'll probably go through that in a bit more detail shortly, or do you want to just run through it all now?
We might as well run through it now.
We might as well just keep churning through it. So I suppose for some people it has zero impact. Like if you need the income to live already, you need the income to live, and you might be drawing down more than the minimum. For some people that might be drawing down a pension as well as still working, it's an opportunity for them to reduce how much they're drawing down to still get the tax advantages of having a super pension, but not depleting their balance when they don't really need the funds coming out of super. So keeping more in the best tax environment most likely for them for longer. So I was probably surprised to see this. I don't know about you. I personally just didn't expect it to go for another year. I was happy it went for when it first came in. I thought it was great. Second year, I thought it was a nice bonus. Third feels a bit almost of a stretch. Most of our portfolios are back to where or above where they were.
Correct. I think when they first introduced this type of measure post GFC, you could really see the benefit of people's reduced balances. Like essentially, people having to sell assets at the bottom of a market to fund their minimum pension payments. It's kind of not the case. Like if in most portfolios they've recovered to the point where it's not really an issue, but maybe it creates an opportunity for people to just keep a little bit more of that income or those assets inside that nil tax pension environment.
It certainly doesn't hurt anyone. That's probably the thing. It's just a nice bonus, additional lever we can choose to pull on if we want to. It doesn't put anyone out, I don't think.
Well, perhaps those people that have been, reluctant to move super to pension, maybe they might be the people who think, I really don't need that income. Why do I want to take 5 or 6%? Again, I don't think that's a huge issue, but if that was the impetus for people not creating super pensions when they're able to, and it can be tax free, maybe it's an encouragement for those. But it's kind of a neutral.
It's a nice to have.
It's a nice to have. It gives us a few more options. I'm sure our paraplanners aren't that wrapped about having to rework advice documents, but
they might be happy. Keep them busy. So again, I think it's. We've probably talked about this with current clients over the last few years anyway, because we've had this conversation, and I think we might be having nearly take 3 or take 2 for some of them of, your pension payments will go up from July.
They'll revert back to the new minimum.
Yeah, and instead now it'll be okay. Well, it won't. So we'll stick with what we've been doing. So again, for any clients listening that are worried or have a question about it, reach out and we'll chat through it. But I don't think it's a drastic one. It shouldn't impact. Don't feel like you'll get less income. You'll only get less if you choose to get less. If you need more, you can always draw more. There's no change to the top end of it.
Yeah, other than the minimum obligation, the choice is yours about what you take. All right, what's next, mate?
Well, always a fun term, the low middle income tax offset. So I think they call this the Lamington. I think that's what they refer to it as now. So I suppose it's a bit of a tax break for people in probably that sort of what they deem the middle earners, or low and middle. I think scaling out at about 126,000 of income personally. So anyone up to that point is going to get a benefit, but it's going to depend case by case on who you are, how much you'll get back. But basically, it's a one-off. You use the term sugar hit at tax time when you go and lodge your return if you fit under that threshold. So did you want to touch on that a bit further? Yeah,
well, maybe if I go back to how I looked at it through the individual lens, for individuals to think, oh, okay, that's a good win. There's a sugar hit in this 21-22 tax year, which I think it does apply in the 21-22 tax year. I'm pretty sure. I'm reading it right here. So it's a sugar hit, but if you look at it then from a political point of view, you go, oh, okay, this only applies once, and it's a sugar hit now. And it's coming just before the federal election, so it's not going to change people's worlds long term. Certainly in the short term, with increased cost of living, it's going to be a nice benefit. But from a strategy point of view and a planning point of view, there's probably not a lot of. It doesn't really open up a whole heap of opportunities for people to try and get that. And it's probably not the ultimate focus in our planning would be to qualify for that low to middle income tax offset.
Yeah, I think it's probably just a personal choice when you get that refund, what you choose to do with it. And again, maybe it's something boring like a debt reduction or a super contribution, or maybe it's that opportunity to do something nice for the family or do something nice for yourself. So
yeah,
again, that's probably it's a bit of a. Again, I'm not sure. It's like you can sort of read into what the government is trying to do at times, and it's just a nice little free hit, top up in the pocket for them. So.
Yeah. Well, when you think about what the government actually wants people to do, they probably wanted to spend it.
Yeah, that's the thing. Go and buy a new TV. Or
the question is, will people actually go and spend it? Is there enough incentive as people have concerns about their job and the cost of living? Will they spend it?
Might go fill up their car. Maybe it'll help them.
Maybe. It's getting pretty expensive. I think that might be on your list. We're coming up to that.
So we'll jump. We'll tie it in with the next point. And I suppose the next one, again, this is the real sugar hit one, is the one-off cost of living allowance. So again, these sort of things feel a little bit rebranded from the last couple of years as well. Through COVID, you had anyone on an age pension, disability benefit, care allowance, etc. All those social benefits, they were getting these one-off payments, and we're going to get another one, which will be the $250 coming through in April. Conveniently timed around election and starting to think about who you're going to vote for. So it's a little payment rolling in. For all those people on a payment, they don't have to do anything, as you've seen in the past. It just hits your account as part of one of your payments through that period in late April. So, again, you want to touch on what your sort of take on that?
Well, from a personal point of view, all of our clients, I'm glad they get it. And the extension of that is what they use it for, and that will be dependent upon each individual. From a political point of view, you go, okay, I can see what's going on here. And good luck if the Labor government was getting to unwind that.
I think they've already said that believe I read yesterday they've already said they'll do the exact same.
Yeah.
So I think they've supported already.
So from an economic point of view, really the question is Australia's market and economy is, relatively speaking, it's cranking along pretty well, but cost of living rises are there. As the government spends more, the concern is that it pushes up the cost of living. So they're kind of running that fine line of, giving everyone $250. Does that in effect make that $250 not worth that much because the cost of living pressures continue to push it up? I don't know, but I think it's a welcome. It'd be a welcome receipt for those people who are age pension, disability pension, carer payment. What else we got? Carer allowance, pension concession card holders, and
even things like farm household allowance. Oz study. There's a heap of different. Just about every benefit available will get that payment. So, and again, it's an individual thing. So if you've got a couple, 2 age pensioners, $500. That's pretty good for them. So, yeah, won't say no.
That's a couple of. That's maybe 1 tank of fuel in a big Prado. Is it?
With their caravan on, they probably not even.
Maybe half a tank of fuel if you've got a dual tank.
Yeah, some of those the nomads might be parked up with their caravans. I think just waiting for the fuel price to come down.
Yeah, that is a real consideration. You think about how many nomads and our clients that are actually travelling around Australia at the moment. The cost of travel is enormous. It's enormous.
And if they're going into those regional and remote areas, you think $2 a litre is expensive here, be $3.20 out there. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how they combat that to make people travel, because again, they want to stimulate the economy, but they're sort of pushing the accelerator and tapping the brake at the same time.
It's a tricky one, yeah. And when you hear, I was listening to Josh Frydenberg talk about how Australia, comparatively speaking, is doing so well economically post-COVID, and I think to myself, geez, the others aren't setting a great example though. Like if we're comparing ourselves against some of the other developed markets like the US, if that's our point of comparison, we'd want to be doing better than them.
Sometimes it's hard. We get swallowed up by the negatives. Like the economy's actually not too bad. Like that's people think, rates are rising and all this. That's a bad thing. It's actually a reflection of the fact that we've come through things pretty well.
Well, I suppose this is again like which lens you look at through. If you look at it from an economic point of view, who's asking the question? And if you're looking at it from an economic point of view, and you look at like macro from top down, you go, okay, we're doing pretty well. And then you drill down into various areas of the of Australia and the different socioeconomic areas. It's sort of a dual pace economy. You've got people who are really struggling, and you've got people that are travelling really well and benefiting from the growth in the last few years.
I think COVID and the impact of that, and then now carrying on, and I've probably said this a few times, is that the gap between the two ends of town have just grown, and we've ended up more. Again, we still got a lot of people in the middle, but people who were struggling at the start of COVID are probably struggling equally or more, and people who were doing really well, a lot of them are doing even better than they were before.
I know. We talked just offline before we jumped on about how we see that in the financial planning industry, and it's evident that the people that probably need financial planning advice the most are the people that can least afford it. And I think that gap, like you said, continues to grow. And I know there's nothing in the budget about affordability of financial planning, but I think that's one area that the government could probably look at in the future to say, how do we make sure that people that actually genuinely need advice and support can afford to get it, and that they're not just left with no support.
It's probably not a big vote puller, and it's probably not going to be a headline item on any of these. But again, and we're invested in it, being in that business, so seeing it all the time, that people who can afford it, they're going, okay, obviously we can improve them a lot still, but the ones that really need it to get them, just get them ticking over and building something, they really struggle to even afford an initial, meeting or an initial bit of actual structural advice.
Yeah, I think that we're going off on a little bit of a tangent. We said we're going to keep it at 20 minutes, but the tangent here is that I think the two levers that the government could pull to help people get advice is either subsidise them to actually get advice, or number two, reduce red tape, reduce the onerous amount of red tape that's involved in compliance and advice. Well, the industry's seen lots of change. I think the if you like the dead wood in the financial planning industry, those that didn't have qualifications and accreditations are largely gone. We're left with a small percentage of very qualified and professional advisors that, I don't think the level of compliance that exists at the moment really matches the quality and the professional judgment of the advisors that exist.
It's going to be a slow process to build that back up. And again, there's still a lot of mistrust in the industry, which we understand because there was a lot of bad eggs in there who did the wrong thing. And everyone suffers from that, which in the industry, but that's extended now to the actual consumer and the people who need advice. They're the ones that actually suffer now worse than anyone because they simply can't afford to get in and get advice. Yeah,
and maybe it's a view of, that short-term pain to get rid of the dead wood, and then I think what will happen is that we start to see an ease of that compliance burden, which I hope, because our time is best spent having conversations with clients, like having detailed conversations with them about how we can improve their circumstances. Anyway, I've taken us right off track there, Ben.
It probably does lead into the fourth point where we're going to talk about a little bit about expanding the home guarantee scheme and allowing people to get into their first home. And I suppose we've probably seen where people who are desperately trying to save to get their deposit together struggle to necessarily fund, or don't feel funding advice to do so is a good investment when they're trying to save as well. So I suppose what they're trying to do, they're trying to make it more accessible for people to buy their first home and, have that feeling of protection and safety of being in a home.
So what is the home guarantee scheme? Let's start there.
Yeah. So basically, and they use the term slots a lot when they talk about it, but basically they're opening up X amount of slots, which the government will support in people having a 5% deposit to get into their own home. So, traditionally speaking, 20% was the magical number that people needed to save up to get in. We've seen that reduced down and people getting in with less than that if they've got, maybe a guarantee of a family member or something like that.
So just if you didn't have a 20% deposit, the bank would then, through a secondary insurer, charge you mortgage insurance, which is a decent chunk on a first home purchase.
Yeah, or they would simply say no unless you get, and that's probably happening more and more now. The banks are a little bit more conservative with lending, is that they just simply would say no, too bad. So you haven't got enough. Sorry, but we're not even going to accept that insurance on it. You need to get 10 or 20%. So again, I think it's angled towards probably single people where it's even harder again to save for a deposit, and also with growing prices of property that they want to get people in with a 5% deposit. Now, when I read that initially, I think, again, pessimist in me says, can they afford, even if they can, okay, that's great, but does it work for everyone? It still needs to be really carefully looked at.
I think it's probably the financial planner in you, not the pessimist, because immediately you're thinking beyond just the deposit. You're thinking,
well, I'm thinking, if they're struggling to save a deposit, what's their cash flow like? What happens if interest rates go up? What happens if they have to do some repairs and maintenance that they didn't foresee? I just, again, it's the protective mechanisms that I like to have built in that make me a little bit nervous. It'd be like if a client comes in, they've got exactly a 20% deposit to buy a house and nothing beyond that. I'd be thinking, all right, well, we need to get to 22, 23, 24% because I want to have some buffer there that we can cover costs and unforeseens when they move into that property for the first few months. You see it every time when they move into a home, they're going to buy some furniture, appliances, etc., etc. So again, you look at that on a 5%, and there might be it might be circumstantial. Like they might have great cash flow, but they've just been through a separation, or there's been they've just finished clearing off a student debt or something. There might be something to it. I suppose the key thing is we need context to their situation, and I think number one, speaking to planner, number two, speaking to a broker, because the broker will find, okay, because the slots aren't just, you don't just go out and you get one. Certain banks get allocated these slots for the 5% scheme. So you need a broker to find who's got them available, apply for them, accept it, and then go through the process, because you don't want to, the other risk you run is, oh yeah, I can use that scheme, but my interest rate's actually at 1.5% higher than what people off the street are getting because I'm in one of those slots. So it's got a lot of layers to it. This again, I think with anything, it's nice to have it there as an option, but does it have to be used? Maybe not.
Yeah, and is it used in every instance? Probably not.
Yeah.
Yeah. The other one, which is sort of tied to that, I'm looking at the budget release from I think it's AMP, and they talk about the eligible first home buyers may also take advantage of the first home super saver scheme. Now, to date, I've not had a client that has used the first home super saver scheme. I don't know. Have you?
Only a couple, and it's been not for long periods of time either. Again, it probably sounds like something. It's not that we neglect it. It's just it doesn't fit for so many people. Like it just hasn't worked for them, or they haven't needed to, or they've been at that point where they're about to basically purchase, and the benefit of putting it in and going through the rigmarole of getting it back out hasn't been good for them when you're going to have a lot of other things going on. So again, I don't think we discount it altogether. It's just it doesn't fit for some people.
Yeah, and I know when these changes with Super were first introduced, I didn't really feel comfortable with it at all. One of the things that, this is probably going back to my early days in financial planning, is that the idea was that don't mess with Super. Like, don't change the rules. And we've seen lots and lots of changes. People have dipped into Super with the hardship over and the COVID early release payments. That's the sort of stuff that concerns me, where you have, we're very lucky that we've got this big pool of Super in Australia, but I think having people use it for something other than retirement always gets me a little bit concerned.
We get banged into us as from a study perspective. It's sole purpose test, which when you break it down, they're just saying the sole purpose of Super is for retirement. So you can't use it for anything other than generating wealth to fund your retirement. And we are happy to give you very favourable tax outcomes on earnings and growth inside the fund, because you're saving for retirement. So then you get this real messy situation where you start to go, oh, well, people are struggling to save for homes, then let them pull some out of Super. And that's been floated multiple times as well. The first home Super saver scheme I find a little bit bizarre, in the sense that you're just putting money into Super to then pull back out later.
Well, that's a really important point. I don't know whether you've got it on your budget release, but on the self-managed super fund magazine release, they talked about that the actual super saver scheme has increased. So you can take out from, instead of 30,000, you can take 50,000. But to your point, you've actually got to put it in there first. You don't just get open access to take 50,000 out of your super.
It's also messy for the actual person putting the money in to know what they've put in and how much they're going to be able to pull back out. Because let's say that they've been working for a few years, they've got 20 grand of super, and then they start putting in these additional contributions, and they're putting it in there, and it just all gets wound up into one ball of wealth. And until they actually trigger the redemption of it and the applied earnings gets added on, they don't necessarily know exactly what they've got. Loosely, you go back and work it out and you can track it. But it's not that clear. Like, where I have used it once in the past for a client, we talked about using it, was actually setting up a second super and just using one super for almost retirement and one for the first home super saver scheme. And yes, you might have paid a small account fee to have it.
That's not a recommendation.
No, definitely not. But for them, it gave them clarity over knowing
that's for retirement.
That's for retirement.
Super.
That's for my first house.
First house.
Yeah, and I had a client actually come in to me not that long ago who had actually done that herself. She'd had an old employer super fund from a previous job. She had another one, and she said, "Oh, we needed the separation because I just didn't like not knowing, because people look at it and think there's more than what there is. There's also tax on the way out. Like, realistically, the only saving on the first home super saver scheme is the tax on the earnings it generates, because you pay 15% when it goes in and you pay the gap when it comes back out again. So it's not that your marginal tax rate's 30 cents in the dollar. You don't save 30 cents in the dollar. You save on what the earnings of the savings generate. So, which is not necessarily huge amounts when you're talking about a capped figure of 30 or 50,000 a year.
Yeah, it doesn't really have the huge appeal that from a financial planner's perspective we'd want to see, to use that as a really robust strategy.
Don't get me wrong. I think, dollar for dollar, there's a benefit. We say this to clients often, that there's a balance between the financial benefit and just the actual implementation and the benefit of actually doing this. Like, you need to find the balance that works for you. Ultimately, financially, we'd work for it forever until the day we die, generate wealth and spend nothing, live off 2-minute noodles at home. That'd be the best financial thing. You spend nothing and you just work forever. But that's not realistic. So it's a bit like these little, and then you apply that to a small scenario and you go, we could do that, but it's going to cost us, even say having a second super fund might cost them $80, $90 a year. The tax saving might only be that from doing the whole system. So should they actually do it?
Yeah. This is where looking at one thing in isolation, we bang on about this all the time, but looking at one scenario or one just isolated aspect of your financial situation is dangerous. That's why you've got to consider everything. You've got to consider everything that is involved in your own sort of personal circumstances to get, I suppose, the best outcome that you can. All right, mate, what's next?
I think that was the key. Again, that was my 4 takeaways from it. Again, there's lots of other points in the budget which affect people in different ways. So, again, whether that's financially in their pocket, whether it's emotionally, and where their beliefs lie about where funding will go, etc., etc. But it's probably not our place to be banging on about too many of those things. I don't. Is there anything on your side of things that you were thinking that sort of jumped out when you look through any of the financial implications of it?
Now, most of the things that jumped out at me, as I said, were I looked initially for the financial planning opportunities. I don't think there's an enormous amount of changes that would alter our sort of strategic thinking with clients. Most of my thinking about this budget around the sort of economics of it and what sort of impacts it's going to have on cost of living pressures and wage growth. And from a political point of view, how does this actually pan out? And to me, it looks like a bit of a sugar fix for an election coming shortly. Even the one I think we touched on it briefly, that fuel excise, they've reduced the fuel excise, give people some cost of living relief with petrol. But it's temporary, so someone's going to be the bad guy. Either the current government or the Labor government's going to be the bad guy if they decide to unwind that in, I think it's in place for 6 months.
Yeah, I didn't even look at the term. I know that they made it very, very clear, the word temporary. That was the key, because they generate a lot of income.
Yeah,
like it's a massive money spinner for the government to fund other things. So they're pretty keen not to keep it around for too long. But I think.
Well, it's kind of a little landmine if they're out of they're out of leadership and the Labor government comes in. It's a nice little landmine left for them.
Leave them here, deal with this one.
Work that out. Right. Anything else? I saw that the marginal tax rate thresholds in
it's 2024-5 financial year is the first one, and we've talked about this. I think last budget is when this was announced. It could have even been the one before. It's been on the cards for a while. Just the amendments to those tax brackets and how that looks. And I think what they're trying to do is have more people paying the same rate of tax is a very high level view of it. You'll find that the brackets will be a lot wider. So at the moment, we've obviously got a lot of tiers, and as you earn more, your rate of tax is going up. What they're looking to do is just sort of, I suppose, simplify it. And people have been sort of going on about it for a while around the fairness of it. Again, we won't probably get bogged down in that side of it, but that will flow through. Again, we're still a couple of financial years away from it. And I don't get too caught up in these things personally, because I always think that if it's still that far away and potentially we have a change in government, who's to say that goes ahead? Yeah,
until it's actually locked and loaded and legislated.
I'm very, very hesitant.
We've seen it before, seen things that have been proposed and then just that fall through. So.
Yeah, especially with all sorts of contribution caps and downsides, all those things. That they're all until they are locked and loaded in law and you can use it. I'm hesitant to look.
Here's a question. Here's a hypothetical question. I know, without notice, if there could have been any change that would have given you some strategic options with clients, what would you have liked to have seen?
Good question. I think one of the ones that people want to do but maybe need a little bit more incentive is actually to invest, because it's difficult without knowledge to do something yourself, like to start investing in a measured manner. So, people will go and buy a property because they understand the property and they can buy it. But maybe that was not the best thing for them. It's just going to be luck of the draw how that ends up. But let's say that they have a small bit of surplus and at the moment they're just saving it in their bank account. An ability to get either some tax incentive or some other incentive, maybe a matching from the government on a non-super investment to build their own pool of wealth. Because long term what that does is protects the person, and then that protects the government and the taxpayer from them needing welfare or something. So, if they promote them to invest and they do $1 for dollar for the first 12 months or whatever it is, I'm literally just making this up on the spot.
No, I like
and then
it.
you build a pool of wealth that's invested, and that person has an impact on their ability to work, generate income, or a health impact. Something pops up. They've got something they can pull on before they need to go to super or the government or friends and family. So they actually self-insure themselves through investment.
Well, I think about my first investment ever, and what you're saying is kind of like what Peter, my father, did for me when I first started investing, had my first job. As he said, he would match my initial investment into a managed fund. And I think there were probably some, I can't remember exactly, but he probably put some caveats around it and said, listen, you can't withdraw it straight away. Like, you've got to leave it there for, a period of time. That idea, it's that incentivizing and, more importantly, educating people about the benefit of investing early, and also the benefit of making small incremental contributions to investment, I think are really important.
It's self-fulfilling. Like, once they, and I said this to so many clients where I can probably feel they could do, let's say they could do $200 a week of investment. They've got enough cash flow surplus, they could do that and say, let's just do 20 or 50 a week. Because I've got confidence in the fact that if we set it up correctly, they do it, they see how it works, the 50 will become 100, will become 150, will become 200. So you got to sort of, walk before you run with it. But it gives them, they see it works, and then they do it. But the issue at the moment is that they go, oh, there's not really much incentive, probably end up generating a bit more taxable income. Like, it all gets too hard. Whereas if there was that incentive just to start it, and that's why you might only need to do it. It might be, we'll match you for $5,000 across the first 2 years. So that goes, well, they put in 5, I get another 5, it gets to 10. That would be enough time for them to understand what it's doing and probably stick with it. That's my opinion. That's a very personal opinion, but maybe we might have just blown
the budget though, mate. We've put us into significant deficit, and
it's good because those people now have 10 grand, which means they won't need any assistance for minimum X amount of months to cover their mortgage when they've lost their job.
Yeah. Well, I think it's a good point that everything that we think about, and we said it before, that there's a bunch of people that probably sit in a pocket that aren't able to get advice. And from an education point of view, they're the people that we want to become like well-educated citizens that understand, they're financially literate. And I think the earlier you can give people some incentive to invest, then again, there's nothing really incentivizing, like unless you're on, a significant marginal tax rate. Obviously, you've got some concessions there with, maybe gearing or something of that nature, franking credits. But for the early adopter or the early investor, what incentive is there for them to, number one, start investing, but also then take responsibility for their own sort of financial affairs? I think we might have just solved actually, if
might give Josh a call.
Yeah, I'll give Josh a call, and maybe, now I'm thinking about it, maybe we should run for Parliament.
Well, everyone's always told me PB should be a politician, so maybe we can get him to run and we'll just feed him the ideas.
Is that because he always tells you what you want to hear, or
I don't know, he's just very, very good at,
or because he's a statesman?
I don't know what it is.
He can talk the leg off the chair.
Yeah, he can. Yeah. He's passionate.
Yeah,
I'm sure he'd be invested in it, and he wouldn't be afraid to say something if someone didn't like it either.
Yeah, well, I think if we could get...
He probably wouldn't last 5 minutes in reality.
No, probably not. He might say something inappropriate and they'll exit him stage left pretty quickly.
Yeah.
All good. Is there anything else, Ben? We got anything else?
I don't think so. I think that's probably, again, we probably said, we'll do a quick 10, 15 minute budget podcast, probably tracking at 40 or something. And if you didn't ease us back, we'd probably go for another 2 hours. So hopefully that's been somewhat informative. Again, there's probably a fair bit of personal opinion in there. Everyone has their own take on it. Some little wins. I don't think this is... I think when you asked me this morning, what did you take of it, or what did you think of it, I thought there wasn't a lot in there. Like, versus what we've seen in the last couple of years. It was pretty sort of line and length. Not much drastic
is that
change.
a cricket analogy?
Yeah, it was a warnings thing last night, so it was maybe in mind. So
yeah, did you watch it?
Yeah, it's pretty good.
Yeah,
Get
did you tear up?
No, I don't think I've got tear ducts.
It's a pessimist in you.
Must be very, very vanilla. So yeah. Anyway, I don't even know what we're talking about, but
No,
I
just
think we're good.
the wrap up.
We're
of this.
wrapped.
Yeah. All right. Well, we hope you enjoyed today's podcast. Well, I think we've said it before, but we'll say it again, that obviously this is opinion, no advice in this. If you are keen to understand more about how financial advice could benefit you, then jump on the socials. Check us out on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter at Burke Britain FP, or just Google us at Burke Britain Financial Partners. Check out our reviews, testimonials, and you can even make a time to see Ben or myself by just clicking book now on the website. So that's it. We'll see you next week, and thanks for listening.
Any information contained in this podcast is of a general nature only. No account was taken as to the objectives, financial situation, or needs of any particular person. Therefore, before making any decision, listeners should consider the appropriateness of any information with regard to their particular objective, financial situation, needs, and seek independent advice from a licensed professional specific to their circumstances.
All right, hit it.
That translates to don't be a moron and act on what some random person says on a podcast. Take personal responsibility, do your homework, ask questions, and speak to an actual human that knows what they're talking about before you do anything. PP Financial Solutions Proprietary Limited, trading as Burke Britain Financial Partners, are authorised representatives of AMP Financial Planning Limited, AFS, licence number 232706.